putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. And of course, I am Brett Siegel, the Disgruntled Millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in Northern Florida, where I am always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, sexism, homophobia, and patriarchy. And let's not forget your toxic masculinity. We are here with Michael Campina, a photographer who is in ground zero at the Charleston Confederate rally where white supremacists and Antifa, about 50 of each of them were having it out. We keep on hearing about how the South is this awful, terrible, racist place where racists and KKK are just swarming around trying to lynch black people and bring back Jim Crow and bring back slavery. But unfortunately, this Charleston rally was a little bit anticlimactic in that way. There weren't droves and parades of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of white supremacists. It was really just a bunch of people, a small little bunch of people who were just making a bunch of noise on a certain day. So, Michael, let's talk. Yes. Let's talk about the difference between Antifa and the white nationalists. What were the speeches like, and what were the responses like?
All right, so I have to correct you here for a moment. I'm sorry. There was about 50 on the left, if we're going to call them left, and about 3 on the right.
Oh my God. So in other words, there were about 3 white nationalists there. Okay. The left you would think that there was about 3 million, considering how insane the left is going over this stuff.
And we'd have to be even more fair, I think, and just say that they were members of the secessionist party or sympathetic towards having ancestors who lived in the antebellum South and fought for a cause that they believe in. And I guess it's their right to believe in whatever they want, I guess.
Right. Not necessarily racist. I mean, like I said earlier, these could have been 3 guys who just want states' rights and want their independence and want staunch independence. Maybe that's it. Maybe it was nothing racially motivated whatsoever. But in that vein, let's continue.
Yeah. So, as far as that day went, most of my colleagues would be considered left-leaning. Or progressive or whatever, and I love my people. Most people assume that I'm left-leaning because of the nature of my work and, certain views that I have on life, but I'm rather kind of the person that just whatever makes sense, I go with that. If somebody on the right makes sense, then cool, let's go with that. If somebody on the left makes sense, ideology I feel like is destructive for the overall dialogue. And, I really, really, really wanted to get into what my young, passionate anti-monument protesters were getting into, but there came a point where I just didn't understand what we were talking about.
Well, what were the anti-monument protesters even talking about during their speeches? What were the points of view that they were trying to bring across? Were they just basing everything on emotion, or were they citing statistics about how Confederate monuments increase racially motivated crimes, or what was it? Was it just them just on a microphone just screaming bigot, racist, homophobes? Like what was it?
It was more like the latter. It was they were sharing a megaphone, so anybody who wanted to share their thoughts, and people would come up and they'd basically just share anecdotes. One kid talked about how his father, a black kid, talked about how his grandfather, was pinned down by a bunch of white guys in his youth and poured hot water on his head, and he had forever had scars on the back of his head where he couldn't grow hair, and he told that to his grandson his whole life to not forget that. Things like that, you know what I mean? It almost felt like a cathartic release, for a community of people who maybe have not had enough open dialogue over the years, and this was just like a forum for everybody to just kind of tell their truth. I did kind of wonder where some of the hysteria was coming from. One lady in particular, don't quite understand where she was going with the whole thing, but apparently a relative of hers was a judge at the trial of a man named Robert Smalls. Now, Robert Smalls was a slave who captured a Confederate ship and tried to go to freedom. He later went on to do great things with his life, be political. But during his trial, her great-great-grandfather tried to work against and, try to convict him for his crimes. And so she was there to apologize for her great-grandfather. And I don't understand why. Why the guilt?
Right.
I mean, that part I just don't quite understand yet.
Let me explain this to you a little bit. It's a part of this whole white privilege / white guilt culture where we're white people. If you have lighter skin, even not even just white people, anyone who has lighter skin, you can have a black person with lighter skin and they have light skin privilege. The whole point is the closer you are to being white, the closer you are to being guilty. And if you have that kind of guilt where you have this white skin, so for example, this person's grandparent tried to prosecute the slave. It's just this collectivist mindset where you are responsible for someone else's actions. If you eat a bowl of soup, another person doesn't get full. If you eat a bowl of stew, another person doesn't get full. If another person eats a bowl of stew, you don't get full. This is why collectivism is essentially and fundamentally wrong. You can only be responsible for your own actions. And what you're saying is that this Antifa person was basically trying to apologize for her grandparents. It's like holding somebody responsible for actions that they didn't do. And the part of white guilt that really makes me upset is that people who generally have good intentions and want to make the world a better place are brainwashed into thinking that they need to apologize for things that they didn't even do, that were a part of a time that they had no responsibility for. They did not start slavery. This girl did not hold slaves. She did not, she's not a racist, presumably. I mean, it sounds to me like even though she's white, she doesn't really like white people. But presumably she's not a racist, So why is she apologizing for the actions of someone else?
I think it's a great question. And for me, it makes more sense. I certainly do not want to be responsible for anything my ancestors did. God knows that.
There were probably a bunch of conquistadors that, impaled their enemies. And
yes, I have family that comes from Spain, apparently. And, I can't even imagine what they must have done to the poor Native Americans when they got over here. And I'm certainly not going to apologize for it. I'm a product of that. I can't do anything about it.
Right, and I don't think you should. And I don't think any rational person would hold you responsible for what the conquistadors did. I live very close to St. Augustine, and I always go to this fort. I play some music out at this fort. It's the oldest fort in Florida. It was one of the first ones to be put there by the conquistadors. It's this amazing, big, beautiful rock. And every time I look at it, I think some Spanish conquistador is about to walk out of it and impale me. And it's just this awesome, amazing feeling, being surrounded by the oldest place in America. But I don't walk around to the next Latino person and or the next Spanish person and say, and look at them with terror in my eyes, thinking that they are going to impale me. That's just not how history, works. So, to me, it seems like it seems really, It seems out of line even because, this person who was probably shipped in on some bus basically came into this community that they probably don't even live in and started telling everybody who lives there what to do and how to feel and what to think. And it's really, really unfortunate. What were some of the reactions from the anti-Antifa folks, the three rabid racists who were there in that day, like the three, not 3 million, everyone, like the left wants you to believe. 3. What were they? What happened when they started speaking?
Well, first, I will never impale you.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate that. and I won't Jew you out. I promise.
Yes, thank you. That would be great. I wish I would have heard more. I did see something positive happen at the end. Why didn't you hear more though? Were there? Oh man, it was pretty unfortunate. Protests and rallies for me are the most basic building block of freedom of speech and letting the establishment know that things are not okay. And I think it's a really great American tradition. But it doesn't work if you're going to be as bad as the side that you're fighting against. you know. And if you hate someone for being intolerant and you don't tolerate their views, it's a zero-sum game.
Right.
You know, somebody's got to be the bigger person.
That's intolerant.
It is.
Being intolerant of intolerance is intolerance by definition. We've got a quick break coming up. We will be right back. You can get me at Shaq General. We will be right back with Mike Campina.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.